I think what I did show was that all the buildings that he did build, I thought were moving and extraordinary. The villain for me is the fact that he was badly copied and copied without the vision. For me, he's a hero and will always remain a hero because he captured more than architecture, he captured more than style, he captured the zeitgeist of the time, and people were at the time obsessed with cars, with motorways, with traveling, with going abroad, with internationalism, and he brought that together. So we have to go beyond the style, and I think that yes, some of the buildings that Wayne has shown have been demolished, but there is an example of Park Hill that was nearly demolished, and it's because we are thinking about how to bring life to the streets and the sky, because we are putting money into the public realm, because the people who are moving into those, or will be moving in those flats, have chosen to move into those flats rather than being forced to, that Park Hill should be and will be a success.
Thank you very much. Nick?
Two more quick confessions. The first is I've never been to a building designed by Corbusier. And the second is that when John asked me which side of the debate I would like to speak on, I said either.
There's a vote winner.
Actually, that was neither. The issue for me, or the one, there are very, very many reasons why Corbusier is a hero. There is one chink in his armour, and actually more fool the people who slavishly followed his doctrine, because in actual fact I don't think he was asking for that. I think he was setting out a new agenda for a new age, and the people that interpreted it literally and didn't question it and didn't appropriate it are the people who are the real villains, not Corbusier. I think the real fundamental failure was the ambition of social engineering, because that was clearly one of his principal objectives, and is the most dangerous of objectives for anybody involved in the built environment. And John Thompson's perspective is a seductive one and a well-trodden and well-patronised one. But my worry is that if you follow his doctrine, the doctrine of the street, the doctrine of scale, then we end up with the Prince Charles view of the world, the Poundbury's, and I would rather live in a world dominated by Corbusier than a world dominated by Prince Charles. So let's have a little bit of both, and let's celebrate the things that Corbusier liberated for us to appropriate how we so chose to do in the years that followed his immense legacy.
Thank you very much.
I understand because there's a lectern in the way. The point is that Nick doesn't. That is to say, he does not live in a Corbusian dream, and he could choose to do so. He's a very rich man, and he doesn't. So, like so many people connected with the Corbusian dissertation, he is a hypocrite. The difficulty we have is that Corbusier evidently had heroic qualities, and he evidently made some heroic achievements. We know that. And I think whoever it was that said, why is a villain, I heard you say, why is a villain is because of his polemic. Okay? He embarked on a narrative about how the wide world could be, which was entirely a false proposition. It was unbuildable, unmanageable, and would not be accepted by voluntary persons using their own resources. It was indeed, not his fault, taken up by the charlatans, the footpads and the ne'er-do-wells for their own purposes. The naive fools in the AA like Lasden and Spence, who bought the pictures and then tried to make it in England. And the only people they could make it for were those who had no choice. No choice. So you can finish this by saying, well, okay, let's square this off. Corb did some high-rise ideas which got picked up by people, some of who were baddies. And the way out of this box is that high-rise is cool if you choose it, yeah, and if you spend the money running it. But I will go one more twist, and I'd say that high-rise, whether designed by Corbusier or designed by Basil Spence, or designed by one of those bent crooks from Newcastle who did it with a slide rule using concrete slabs and no insulation. All high-rise is bad. It is inherently unsustainable because of what it takes to build it and what it takes to run it. And even if it's full of rich guys like Ian Simpson with his olive trees on the 35th floor in the middle of Manchester or whatever he's got up there, get out of my sky, get out of my light, get out of my sunshine, get out of my TV signals, get out of my space, get back on the ground with the rest of us. Thank you very much. I can believe that.
Thank you, David. I'm just having one of those Manhattan moments. Wayne.
Architectural heroes, Zaha Hadid, Will Alsop, Frank Gehry and Le Corbusier. I've changed my mind. He's an architectural hero. But he's an uncompromising architectural hero. I mean, can you imagine him or any of them? Can you imagine Zaha Hadid, Frank Gehry, Will Alsop or Le Corbusier compromising to the views of the local council members of Cumbernauld? Can you see them compromising and working with those amazing house builders, Persimmon Homes? That's why Hadid, Alsop and Gehry and Le Corbusier can never be heroes without the word architecture attached to it. But this debate is not about whether he's an architectural hero, it's about heroes and villains, and he's a villain.
Thank you very much, panel. We're about to move to a vote. As a summing up, I think you've heard the arguments very well put. The case for Corb as a genius architectural designer. Question was whether his polemic about, as David Locke was saying, does the polemic about the future of cities invalidate or cancel out or negate whatever his virtues were in the manipulation of three-dimensional space. On the other hand, you've heard the proposition that actually, in relation to the making of cities, the making of blocks and the making of estates, that there might be a case for excitement for what the historian Hugh Trevor Roper once called the fertile error rather than the sterile accuracy, since Corb himself didn't actually achieve any of his town planning propositions. They were polemics and propositions. And can you blame the followers for what went wrong? The blame game is a very common one in Britain. If something's gone wrong, the first thing you look around for is a name, a person, an institution at whose door you can lay the ills of humanity. I think that's why these debates are interesting, because this is not simply an argument about the effect of an individual on culture or on politics and economics, but then it becomes an argument about what is the position of somebody with an idea who cannot know whether that idea will be used, abused, exploited, whether it will be productive or negative. And in the end, people either follow their muse or they follow the money. And I think obviously what we've seen in the whole of the 20th century is a whole series of cultural and architectural and planning propositions which have been exploited sometimes for good reasons and sometimes for bad. And I think that actually Wayne's pictures of those demolitions, it reminded me of of what Charles Jenks called the death of modernism, which was the demolition of the Pruitt-Igoe flats in the Midwest, spookily enough, by the same Japanese architect whose World Trade Center was demolished in quite another way and for quite other purposes 2 decades later. And these demolition shots, I think, bring things into a kind of piquant perspective. Because I think what we would say today, probably, is how dare anybody demolish a building which isn't actually a menace to life or limb? All that embodied energy. Can we really not do things with the existing? And if high-rise was an error, could it be a fertile error? Does it have to be demolition that is the answer? From a personal perspective, I believe that we're going to require planning permission for any demolitions in the very near future, and I expect demolitions to become a thing of the past. You cannot justify them on energy grounds, and therefore I think there might be a future in which the entire history of town planning in the 20th century has to be put in a perspective of how would you keep and improve and upgrade rather than sweeping away, which was what the modernists tried to do to, as it were, the Victorians or that pre-First World War European culture, and which subsequent generations have tried to do to modernism itself. It's not as though the ideals or aspirations are any different, it's just the architecture that's in the firing line. So as you can tell, I found this a stimulating and fascinating evening, and it's going to be very interesting to see how the vote goes. Earlier on this evening, there was, I would say, a 3-2, maybe, something like that, 2-1, whatever it might have been. We're going to do a precise count now so that there isn't any monkeying around with what this audience felt on the night. And to be precise, I think what we'll do is let's kick off with who now, having heard the arguments, whatever they thought when they came into the room, thinks that Le Corbusier was a villain. Let's have all the reds, please. And we've got people who are going to do a count. No double voting, Chairman. George's trousers count twice. You got numbers? Okay. Okay, have we got an agreed number? Yes? 18 and 17 combined, yeah? So that's 35. Okay, those who think that Le Corbusier is a hero. Do you know, on Ready Steady Cook, they do the votes in advance. I was so disappointed when I discovered that. It's for TV production reasons. 30 and 24. Okay, so that's 54 to 35 in this audience this evening.
Hang your horses on this piece of paper that says the format of the evening. It says, the pre and post debates will be counted and announced at the conclusion of the debate, giving a measure of the influence of each team's argument on the perspective of the audience. What was it? What was the count at the beginning?
Oh, Stuart's inquiry.
Oh dear.
What was the count at? Our job was to change the number from the beginning. This is what it says here. No, that says our job is to change more minds than we don't change.
Well, it's still, the vote is still 54-35. And as we all know, you'll interpret it any way you want.
It says it here. Read it.
I read it on the train up, and the result has given us the perspective we all wanted. Okay, if there's anybody who'd like to tell us who Well, Wayne, actually, I'm chairing it, so if you don't mind. You're not in a public company anymore. Okay, tell us if you changed your mind and at the start of the evening you were in the majority thinking Corb was a hero, and you changed your mind and ended up for choosing him as a villain. Anyone? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I think that's 11. Okay, what about the other way round? People who thought he was a villain and now think he's a hero. 1, 2, 3. It's a perfect British accommodation, ladies and gentlemen. We have the Corbusian polemic triumphs, but on the other hand, the Jan Gehl, let's hear it on the streets, has also triumphed as well, and it'll give something for the panellists to discuss further over dinner before Wayne consults his solicitor. Can I thank the Academy of the Urbanism for arranging this evening? It's been very enjoyable, but on your behalf, can I chiefly thank our panellists? Thank you very much indeed.